Hey folks, Dustin Siggins here. Welcome to Labor Day weekend. And I'm here with a really dynamic crowd of former journalists. We're all now in the branding, PR, personal branding spaces. What we're going to talk about is how important is social media to getting into the press. And I run a public relations firm. I believe that social media can be a tool on the front end before getting press. Some people are able to use it to directly get press, and it's a tool for marketing afterwards. But I also think that given how busy and complex social media is, and it's just crowded, that I think it is a bit overrated in terms of being a tool that can actually get you into podcasts or other things because it's such a crowded market and very difficult to stand out. So we're going to go to Renee, we're going to go to Simon, we're going to go to Jamie, and we're going to have a fun conversation for the next hour about how social media impacts your ability to get in the press. Renee?
Yeah, hi. Am I starting with an intro? What am I starting with?
Whatever you want to say.
Well, I here's my perspective. One perspective of many I'll share today, but I have been on about 22 podcasts in the past 3 months, and that has all come from my social media presence. I was saying earlier, like, I don't have a book or I don't have anything that's necessarily newsworthy at this moment,
Correct.
but my presence alone on social media has allowed me to get, this new era of press, which is on podcasts. I haven't landed in a newspaper yet, but I'm working on
What's a newspaper?
it. A media, yeah, right, a written media outlet.
I don't know if we're doing introductions, but my name's Simon. I've worked for the past year and a half in the communications space after close to 20 years in journalism. So I come at it very much still from that journalistic lens. My last role is as an executive producer of a local morning show, and we were getting tons of awesome new talent through social media, looking at TikTok, looking at Instagram. We have a young base of producers and associate producers who are all consuming this content. So not being in this space to me is just how you become, especially if you don't have an established brand, you're very much invisible if you haven't if you're not posting on social media, you don't have a YouTube channel, and especially if you're in that C-suite and you don't have any sort of recognition. And there's a pitch that comes out with that person's name in it, you would Google that person's name to see if they have done media or if they have a social media presence. And if the answer is no, I'm not saying you're shutting the door on the conversation, but it's going to require more vetting and it's kind of pre-approval if you do have a social media presence.
I am so thrilled to hear both of you because there's not enough of us out there preaching this. And I'm really glad that we all got brought together today because I agree with everything you just said. I'm Jamie Maglietta. I'm a television news producer. I'm a veteran of television news. I'll say that at this point. I've worked at MSNBC, Fox News Channel, CNN. I've worked on large morning shows, midday shows, legal shows, and if you were pitching us and you didn't have an online presence, it was really hard sell. And if
Mhm.
you weren't leaning into the media ecosystem on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, it made it even harder because it's news. So I agree with what you're saying, and I think like it's important to have that on-camera presence so we know what we're getting. I do also say with Dustin, like, I wouldn't say showing up on camera and saying your opinion is going to get you press, but it will make it a lot easier for you. And before we continue, Renee, can you just tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't really give much of a background there. So, I was a journalist for about 10 years, mostly print media, and then launched into freelancing. And I really came into the space when it was just starting to shift. Twitter had come on the scene like 2 years before I got my first newspaper job right out of college. And I could already see that it wasn't these legacy media institutions that were going to be calling all the shots. It's like anybody could become their own little mini media empire. So I was interested from the very beginning. And because I was always the youngest person on staff when this stuff was coming out, I was the first one that newsrooms turned to say, hey, can you help us figure out the social media thing? How do we get our journalists on there? So um, I transitioned from journalism into I launched right into sort of the content space, and I bridged those two worlds for a little while with a food blog. Restaurants, hospitality, retail was one of my main beats, and so I had all these connections, and then I used that to have a food blog that was very interview based and took recipes from chefs, and then I had to learn how to really be a social media presence in order to build that. And now essentially I take an editorial approach to content creation, strategic content marketing and brand building for startups, small businesses, and now increasingly individuals, because anybody who has a service-based business, and I've also started focusing a lot on journalists and media organizations. I led a workshop at NPR recently on how to really build your social media presence, because I think it's more important than ever that truth seekers, essentially, right? People who really have integrity in what they're doing and reporting are the ones that are flooding our feeds, right? Not just personalities with opinions, but people that really ground a lot of their perspective in research, right? And stories and examples and data. So yeah, I think it's more critical than ever. I'm really interested in this sort of cause and movement to get more just media people on social media, and in addition to small business owners and
I'm
consultants
in
and
a very
fractionals.
similar boat, so we have some overlap there. I love it.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. I'm gonna jump right into this and blow up the conversation. I was telling you, well, we got somebody onto Fox News Digital through an op-ed, no social media presence. Was in Nebraska. No one's really paying attention to the cornfields of Nebraska. But she had the compelling story. We timed it for Father's Day. It was called, so the headline was something like, I'm grateful for the two fathers in my life, because her biological father was part of the emergency team that saved her life and got her on the ambulance. And then she believes that God helped her heal. Her father actually told her, I can't help you anymore. I've done everything I can. It's up to God and you now. So we called it the two fathers. She didn't have a social media presence. The only press she's ever gotten was when she got in a car accident and some local stories. So I do think that while social media can drive, Jamie and Renee, you've told some really good stories about some of the national voices, and yourself, Renee, and Simon, you've talked about that local media. But I think what you said is really key, Renee. You have to have the research. You can't just be out there spouting. And I think a lot of people think, if I'm loud or obnoxious, or I tell all these personal details about myself, I'll go viral and I will then get press, or I'll get into something else from that. And I think that people are missing that you need what we call the 3 T's. Got the right topic at the right time from someone with the right title. And title is usually not involving the letter C.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's where I disagree with the premise that you need social media, not because of my professional experience, but social media, because it's so crowded. I think you have to, it has to be based on something besides the presence. You have to run a business or have experience as a veteran to speak on veteran issues or something like this in order to be relevant.
And that's the point that I think Renee, myself, we're both making, is you do need to have the background to show up and secure press. If you're going to be sharing your opinion, it doesn't always get you that opportunity on camera. However, I know someone who's a comedian, and she started to show up on social media, and an outlet was looking for someone to just lighten the mood in a culture conversation, and they found her on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I have examples that are constantly tying back to social media.
Mm-hmm.
And having been a producer, on a very reliable show, we needed to have that presence in order to say that this is a reliable source. They are already leaning into the ecosystem of the media, of the press. They may not be quoted in an article, but they have some profound thoughts on Twitter, and they're getting the engagement and they have relevancy to this story that we're discussing. Plus, they have the background. I see you nodding your head. I know.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, just getting back to what Dustin was saying regarding his example. I do think there's definitely a place where social media not having the presence is an advantage for earned media,
Correct.
because specifically with those story characters, right? The people who have
Mm,
the compelling narrative. If you send a link from another hit that they did on another newscast, or as you were saying, like, you send it to Fox, another outlet might not be interested in it because it's already been told. And you
mhm.
have to be aware of that as well. If you're pitching a very strong character, do not send the earned media that you got last week or even yesterday to that outlet.
Mhm.
If they have done something on social that you can send and say, hey, that's the proof of concept, it shows that they are good on camera. But I think journalists are willing to put in the work, and the audiences are more forgiving of someone who's, an average Joe who doesn't have media training,
Yeah.
doesn't represent
Right.
a Fortune 500 company, but is just there to tell a compelling story. And I would argue that those are the type of people I would rather see on TV more often.
Mhm.
So even if you are working with an organization who has a slick spokesperson with a lot of social media background, if you can tell the story of one of their clients who will do a decent job, even if they don't have that proof of concept, there's still a ton of runway for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree.
Well, and just to your example too, Dustin, that is more of an organic story. She's not looking to build a presence, right? She's
Mhm.
not looking to get media necessarily for her business or cause or project, whatever it is. So it's a different approach. And it's like, is it necessary? No. Are there other ways? Of course. And I say this to people all the time. Like I turn down people who I'm like, there's two approaches to marketing yourself right now. And there's traffic-based marketing approach, which is really this like content, social media marketing, developing an online presence and a personal brand. And there's that classic relationship-based approach to marketing, which is like heavily, networking, getting into niche communities, doing local events, and that works too. It's a different approach, and both can work. I don't tell people like you must have social media, because it's actually not right for everyone. Could it benefit your business? Sure. But it's a strategic approach that you need to take to it, and it's a lot of work, right? So it's not necessary, but it's helpful if the all the other things align for that to make sense for you.
And if I could weigh in on Dustin's, like, this story, did she come to you with it and want you to pitch her story to the press? Like, how did it come about?
Client, and we were working with a national organization that had state level allies and partners, and we had a very engaged organization who was a partner, and they said she would be a great voice for
Mhm.
the narrative that we want to get out there.
And see, what I would say with that is, if she had pitched the story on her own, that might not have been picked up. But the
Mm,
fact that you were able to
Mhm.
push that story out there on their behalf with her in
Yep.
it, making it very unique, it made their
Yep.
cause more relevant to that platform, because they're like,
Yes.
okay, I see you're talking to our audience, you're giving us a fresh voice.
Right.
It's Father's Day. I see this aligning. There's not much news on this person. This is a win. You're in television news, you're also always looking for those unique voices that people haven't found, right? The
Right.
undiscovered voices,
Exactly. That's
those
right.
unique sources, right? But guess
Hmm.
what? It's becoming harder to find them, because how many of us are going out and really talking to people in our neighborhood?
mm.
So you're
Me.
really needing
Mhm.
to have like your town square, your little town
Right.
is now social media. Your
Correct.
dentist, your barber,
Right.
everybody you follow are essentially your community. And if someone starts sharing a story about, this amazing experience that this person had, you're going to be like, oh, what happened? Like, you're going to be curious, right?
Hmm.
So if you're not sharing and not showing up, it makes it harder. Like when we were younger, I'm sure we're all about the same age. You didn't really know what was going on in town unless you showed up to those little town meetings or the fair, and you're like getting the gossip at
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
Now it's, where are you going to get that? I
Or
mean, I'm not
consume
talking to anybody at the grocery
It's
store.
it it's really,
consume
yeah.
consume media as well as how we used to do it, right? It would be
Exactly.
watching
Mhm.
our local
Right.
newscasts and reading the newspapers and whatnot.
What is interesting, I heard a perspective the other day from a Tampa Bay reporter. She's been on staff for about 20 something years and has done a lot of narrative storytelling for the paper. And her beat was, she never really had actually a beat. She was just like kind of the storyteller. And she'd find all these very local, compelling, personal stories that would make the paper at the time. And what was so interesting about her perspective is that, it'd be like the dog that, made best friends with the cat, and like little stories like that that really, weren't investigative pieces and weren't speaking to like greater cultural trends or, like whatever, exposing something. But people, they really resonated with people and people loved reading them. And actually, they got so many responses from those stories from readers. Like readers wrote in, just to say how delighted they were to read the story or how touching a story was or how it moved them or how to. And the newspaper, she said, started uh they not investing in those stories and in that reporting. So even though like consumers still very much want those stories, and you see those stories are the ones that are also still taking off on social media. It's these like unique stories, small voices, relatable people, right? Newsrooms they just don't have the budget, right? And polarized stuff sells papers, and exposing wrongs and injustices is sort of like our focus. But people definitely want those stories. It's just like you said, it's someone needs to, if you're not finding it on social media, if people aren't telling their own story and then getting picked up, or getting noticed, and then somebody, knows a reporter that can like pick up the story, it's like,
How are you going to find it?
how are you going to find it? Yeah. Yeah. I would love it if newspapers started investing more in that sort of like on the ground, local investigative reporting, but
Well, let's talk. We've had a discussion about the value of social media. What is the strategy to get picked up in the press through social media? I've not used it super effectively. I'm just, Renee, this is how we met, right? Is I'm a very shy wallflower, wink, wink.
Hmm.
And so what I just do is just if I want to get in the press for my company, when I was a blogger, back when blogging could actually pay something, I got myself in the press all the time, not because I had a strong social media presence. I just reached out to reporters and editors and said, here's a thing that's going on. Here's my opinion or my facts on it. Do you want to talk to me? But over time, I do think that social media is a way, if you are saying something that is genuinely to a narrow audience that no one else is saying, that is well researched or has a lot of experience behind it, that is the foundation to using social media to get into the press. The challenge there, though, is ensuring that you are not just reacting to what's going on, but you have to be a little bit ahead of it. So let's talk about how do you use social media to get into or to get earned media.
If I could
Go
just,
ahead.
I'll jump off if I can here.
Yeah.
I think that for what I would advise clients is that increasingly the value of that earned media click only goes so far because of the the mistrust in mainstream media. So thinking about your strategy from how do we act as an internal newsroom, how do we find the stories that are compelling within our own organization and tell those stories on our own social media platforms. Sure, they may not go viral, but you are starting to build up a culture within your organization where when they find a good story, and I've seen this increasingly where the organizations that will have ambassadors come forward saying, "Hey, I have a good story in my department. Could I be featured on the local newscast, which is
Mhm.
essentially the internal content generator, and when necessary, you can put that on your social feeds." And that link will provide a lot of excitement for your own internal team, getting excited about what they're doing and it being profiled. So that is a good kind of beginning of changing your organizational and thinking about social media as an avenue to get earned media, but really that is at the same time though you're creating much more comfortable people on air, people who are more comfortable with their own voice, who are able to share the stories of your organization and potentially get picked up organically through earned media.
absolutely. Yeah. People ask me this all the time. I was like, how do I get attention? How do I get and retain attention? And I'm like, become someone worth listening to,
Mhm.
right? Like creating that internally. And you just approaching social media depends on your goals, right? But really, if you focus on what gets engagement, there's a variety of things that can get engagement. But if you are someone who can really start conversations and get engagement consistently, it's just that social proof, right? I am someone worth listening to. I am someone worth paying attention to. So having your strategy hinge on that exactly. Yeah. What are the stories that are worth telling? What's compelling to us? If it's not interesting to us, and we're just putting out a bunch of like, hey, we just launched a new product updates on social media, like you're bored by that. Your CEO is bored by that. You can't expect other people to be excited or pay attention to that either.
Yeah, I would agree. I have like, I think it's a 7-step process. And I, after those 7 steps, it's like you can be on cam ready. You can shoot your own content. And then after that, I start teaching people how to network. And I think it's important to be utilizing the social media platforms to also make connections so that the right people are following you. And a part of that, one of the first steps is this framework I have. It's called what, right? You need to know who you are, who you're talking to, how you plan to connect with them, right? Because you want to know how. Is it long form content? Are you doing a newsletter? Are you just showing up on Instagram? Like, how? And then your approach. If you're a lawyer, you may not want to be doing TikTok dances. You may want to be more like Jefferson Fisher, right? Who showed up every day in his car and he's a trial lawyer, gave advice, started to build a following. Now he's got like a lot of money, right? From what I'm reading. And he has a book coming out and he's a reliable source to the media. And it's all
Mm,
about those repetitions, right? And then
Yep.
that T is the transformation. Like, how are you going to help people with your
right,
content? Yeah.
right. What is the value? Wait, so what's
Mhm.
the 7 steps?
Oh, I don't want to go through them all, but I'm building my course. I have a course. I have a whole program coming out. It's been my child this year.
It's exciting.
And I think Renee, guys, you hit the nail on the head there with thinking about what kind of content you're creating. It needs to be relevant to your voice. It needs to be something that, oh, I'm just hearing a bit of feedback here.
Yeah.
You guys, oh, can you hear me okay still? Yeah, so you need to be authentic in your voice, don't do the trending TikTok dances, but create content being yourself, and your audience will see that authenticity shine through. And sure, go through your media training, but when you're thinking about your social media presence, the closer you can be to who you actually are, it makes it a lot easier to show up and day after day and continue building that audience.
Before we move off this, like we were talking before we joined, so I just wanted to bring this up. Like, it's important to know how you want people to perceive you before you start strategically implementing this.
And
Yeah.
so
You don't
important.
want to be
Yes.
up there talking
Yep.
about your hair. Like I was saying in
Right.
grad school, I had a hair business so I could learn how to have a product and sell, right? Because I'm a journalist. I
Right.
don't do that. Did I want to be identified as the girl with gray hair? No. So I had to shift. It's like, well, now that I have a business, right? Now I have to shift again. It's not about me and my life anymore. It's about how you can help others
Well,
versus yourself when you're using social media as a strategy.
I agree with that for the most part, but
Yeah.
I think the way, but to your point, also in terms of being yourself, it's like what
Yeah.
parts of your unique experience and background and personality make you compelling or relatable to somebody else, like finding those little things. I usually relate it back to my business, but sometimes,
Mhm.
yeah, sometimes it's just like I know it's a really touching story and it's more about possibility and hope. I've told it a few times in different ways, but I'm divorced with 2 kids, and I met another man who is also divorced with 2 kids, and now we have
Mm.
4 girls the same age, and it's
So
like that
incredible.
story of like new beginning and hope. And
Mhm.
and I had this like one story about like it was just such a touching moment where we were like running through the airport, and people always say when we're all together, the 6 of us with 4 little girls, giggly little girls, you sure do have your hands full. And I hear that all the time. And I told this story about this, and I was like, yes, my hands are full, but my heart is also really full.
Mm.
Right.
And that was just, that had
Yeah.
nothing to do with my
Yeah.
business. I mean, it's sort of showcasing. I teach storytelling, so it's like it's showing,
Yeah.
how
Right.
to tell a story. But really, it was just like letting people into a little bit more
Mhm.
of the me behind the business,
Yeah.
right? And then I got a bunch of people who were like, "Hey, I have this product, that is actually targeting like divorced parents. Like, great, you're the person I want to, want to work with for my content
Well,
marketing strategy." And people have said to me before too,
Mhm.
like, I was like, I always ask, why did you choose me? Why are you working with me? And one woman was like, well, I just felt like I could get a glass of wine with you.
Hmm.
There's a million people who do what
Yeah.
you do,
right.
but like,
Right.
I wanted to work with you because I feel like we could just get a glass
Nice.
of
Well,
wine and you would listen to my story. So
Mhm.
and
for
I
me,
Yeah, it's
think
like those
too.
pillars. Would you agree? Like you need to have the pillars of who you
yes,
are within our like a rotation on social, but you can also just be very strategic like Jefferson Fisher and
right.
just talk business. There's
Just talk.
there's a
You can,
whole way about it,
yeah.
but you need to know
Right.
what your strategy is before you
Always in his car for some reason
But that's
too.
like that's what I was
always in
gonna
his car.
say. He's also even but
That stands
there's
out
that
though because he's in the car.
personality, right? And it's
Right.
very intimate. Like what's one of the
Intimate.
most intimate spaces is in his car, right? So there he is bringing that in. It's maybe just a little bit more subtle.
I would just
Well, and
say,
Renee.
what I would just say from jumping on what Renee's saying, that people remember, there will be a lot of things that we say in the last hour. I will remember Renee's story, her just telling me that. So
Right.
it's like, because she's
Yep.
invoking a certain emotion, that there's an emotional
Mhm.
attachment to that story, and it will resonate with some who are well, watching the live stream, because they can relate to that experience, or maybe they don't relate, but they can still feel that, that it makes them feel good in their heart, right? So
Hmm.
finding that, tying your own
But
personal branding story into your organization can be helpful in making you stand out and making you an empathetic character to have. Getting this back to getting earned media, right? Like, this is someone I want to have on and to tell their story.
Mhm.
so we have a comment from Susan Powell, and she's with Interstate. They're a logistics and transportation company. We've actually worked with them, full disclosure.
Mm.
And she said we have to shift per platform, right? We're more quippy
Yeah.
on Instagram, but more professional on LinkedIn. And I think that's what a lot of people who are trying to use social media to build their brand. Like, I'm not really present on Twitter X anymore. When I was as a journalist, back when Facebook was had more political, I don't say leanings, but it's more powerful in politics. I was all over Facebook, all over Twitter, because I was a blogger, I was a journalist, I was in the political space. Now, I mean, I got published 3,000 times in politics, and I'm burying those behind media pieces, PR pieces, and business pieces. And it's hard to find those now, thank goodness, because I want to grow my business. I don't want to grow a personal brand anymore. And so, to Susan's point, and even Renee, to your point, like your story fits really well with the brand that you've built. I've known you for about a year. I've been following you a little bit longer on LinkedIn. You have a really great mixture, but what you don't, I think, get into too much is to being too vulnerable,
Mm.
right? Because you don't overshare. Like, you've mentioned, divorce with 2 kids. I don't think you've ever trashed your ex-husband. I don't think you've ever done anything like that. There are people who think that that's a way to stand out. For
Mm.
me, I'm even more, I have 5 kids. The one time my kid has shown up on LinkedIn, it was the back of her head with a terrible ponytail I did. It was my first ever ponytail. And no one cared because no one cares about the back of a kid's head. They care about the kid's face. And that's never going to appear on LinkedIn. So that actually made it very hard for me to be even slightly vulnerable because I just want to protect my kids. Right? So I really don't talk about them. And it was even hard. I actually asked your advice last year, Renee. I wrote an op-ed about my mother passing right before Christmas. And I asked your advice on, is this something am I promoting my mother? Am I using my mother in an unethical way? And you thought it
Mm.
was actually more opening up about myself and less about being, taking advantage of my mother's passing with the piece I wrote and put on LinkedIn. So you were
Mm.
actually really helpful in me trying to find that right balance to make sure I have the right voice because I'm only present on LinkedIn. I don't have the quippy stuff on Instagram. But Simon, can you talk about from local media point, like if you're looking at a small business, I think on Facebook and Instagram, how do you advise your clients to have that balance of different voices for different platforms while still having that same overall narrative?
Well, I think that especially if you don't have any, and you're a small business, you don't have any presence, is choose a platform that best relates to what you're trying to grow and where your customers are. So having any sort of idea or metrics of what if you have an Instagram account for your business, Instagram I think is a good one if you're in any sort of public facing, like if you run a bakery, for example, you want to have, the food shots of all the different, just providing your product and showcasing your product, but also that's a good place to go and share how you share your method, share something about why you cook, tying it back into why you bake, tying it into your, a family story about this is I make the recipe I make is my grandfather's recipe, and I don't think that is taking advantage of your family or leveraging your family. That's part of the story that it makes things compelling. Like we're talking about with Renee, I'll remember what she said about her blended family. So I think finding a platform that works for you and growing it is a good place to start, because it's very overwhelming to say, I need to do LinkedIn, I need to do TikTok, I need to do
Yeah.
Instagram. And then you're going to probably do it all and hustle hard. And then you're getting up at 3 in the morning to start baking and you're going to burn out. So
Yeah,
finding
totally.
one place to start, I would say is the best, because you are familiarizing yourself with that platform. You're getting more comfortable and you can own it. And start sharing your stuff on other platforms as you grow and as you start to get into a rhythm.
So right now, I just followed Renee and Simon on Instagram. So I can drink some wine with you guys. But I would completely agree with you on that. I think I have like a audit that I give people. It's like you want to see how you're viewed by the media online, and that's going to help you identify where your weaknesses are and where you need to maybe put your focus. Because if you, Instagram now comes up in the Google search. So if you're only
Right.
on
Right.
Instagram posting about, your cat and you're pitching press, it's like that's not aligning. So you want to have
Right.
some alignment, but on the personal front, I had an incredible, to me, incredible experience. And I started to share a little bit about it on LinkedIn and on, a little bit on Instagram. I was worried about being personal on LinkedIn because I didn't want whatever I say to negatively impact how someone might view me as a candidate. Because so in 2022, I left my full-time job and I had been dealing with back pain since my second son for 10 years. But when you're in a control room and you're working every day, you're like, I don't have time to be going to a PT. I don't have time for all these doctors, right? And so when my job ended, I went to get seen and I had a compressed, like my spine needed like I needed a surgery. I had to have a fusion in my spine and it didn't go well. So I had a second surgery last year and now I may have to go for a third. Imagine having a job, but to talk about that on LinkedIn, it was like,
Right.
ugh. Once I
Right.
did, I had so many people reach out and say, oh my gosh, like connecting with you on that, where I highly recommend you do take the approach of sharing some of who you are and what you have going on in your life to be relatable. Because even as a manager, like there's some really great LinkedIn profiles. Like this one, I don't want to start dropping names, but there's this one woman, she's a director of television programming. And she was playing the guitar and is like, you know what? I think it's time for me to start trying to learn something new. I'm doing this. It's like, wow, that's a really personal thing. This
It's
other girl, she
inspiring
had the
enough.
same surgery I had, and she showed photos, like she had like a double spine surgery and posted pictures, like, this is why I've been out of the office. Like, I think it just starts to build that relationship. And I'm having a series right now, guys, where I post every other week on Get to Know Me. So I'm all about this on LinkedIn. I think by sharing those personal things, we can start making LinkedIn less of a this is what I did and I'm amazing, and more of a community of people who can relate, connect each other and say, "Hey, Renee, I get you. And I would love for you to work with me because we have this great work-life balance situation and I'm in a similar situation and you'd be a great fit." Like I would think that LinkedIn, as we start sharing, will start to become a better place for us all to find life-work balance for people who are looking for work.
I think it's already trending in that
Yeah.
direction. You know, when you said,
So
Dustin, earlier that like Instagram is quippy and or whatever. Some people are like Instagram's a magazine, and right, it's just like
Yes.
an extension of your website, and TikTok is like easy virality, and LinkedIn is sort of still seen. There's still a perception that it's more professional, but that those lines are totally blurring, and it kind of depends on how you curate your connections too. You know, so like my feed is a bunch. My feed
Right.
is almost skewing too much in the other direction and saying it's like too many personalities. It's like too
I
much
had that for a
like,
little bit too earlier
here's
this
my
year.
breakfast, you know,
Yeah.
here's my lunch, or here's like an idea I had in the shower
Right.
that I wanted
Guess
to
how
share with
offended I
somebody.
was by somebody. Right.
Oh, see, I'm not
Yeah,
seeing that as
but
much.
It,
Maybe
so
I
it
need more
totally
friends.
depends. It just depends on who you're following and what you engage with, right? Like
And
that's
it's
how the
what you
algorithm
engage with.
works. The algorithm gives you
That's
more
right.
of what you're engaging with. That's
Yeah,
it.
that's a
That's
good
right.
point.
The
Right.
algorithm,
So, and
you,
I was
you own your own
engaging.
presence.
Yeah, you totally do. And
Yeah.
you can manipulate it. Right. So
Yeah.
I was joking the other day. I was like, can we bring back some frameworks? Like I need some more expertise in my feed. Like I want to learn things again. And I was joking, but you know, it's also, I know that I am the one contributing to that
The thing is,
algorithm.
you're always gonna get pushback from some who say this isn't when did LinkedIn
Right.
become Facebook?
Facebook, right.
And the
Right.
idea that you're never gonna please everyone because there's certain there's certain thought police that want to say this is how you have to behave and this is how you have to show up on a platform, and I think the ones that really stand out like. I think of the Nick Power example of someone who's just like going in completely breaking all the rules on LinkedIn and getting a huge following because of it. So you really you don't have to follow those rules. I understand though if you're working for a corporation and you want to think about how you are how you want to have a more manicured expression of who you are. I do think that you showing that as much as you're comfortable with, like with Dustin, he doesn't want to talk about a lot about his, raising 5 children and how that impacts his business. There's probably a lot of opportunity there, but he doesn't feel comfortable with that. And
Right.
I think we all need to just respect
Totally.
everyone's individual boundaries about what, and if someone's an overshare, you know how you can unfollow them and you can see the metrics.
Well,
If
that's right.
we have such rich metrics now that you
Mm.
can see what are people liking, what's not really landing as much.
Well, and
And-
to that point, go ahead,
Okay.
Renee. So basically,
yeah.
yeah, in my opinion, at least, you mentioned Nick Powers. I started seeing this guy. I don't know who he is. I started seeing his name pop up about 6 weeks ago. I'm way out. Well, I'm always behind the trends, and that's okay with me. But it's also though, if Nick is breaking all these rules, a lot of people are going to see that and say, "I want to copy that," versus saying, "What is my voice? How can I stand out?"
Well, and
Because,
what's
like,
my
I don't.
goal?
What is my goal? Like,
And
my
what is
goal
my
is
goal, by the
sales.
way? Yeah, because
I-
Nick Powers, by the way, works for a company. All these big personalities have full-time jobs, right? Like none of them, they're all I'm building,
Right.
I'm
I didn't know
doing
that.
a class
Okay.
just on this. I'm like, these are all the big personalities that you're seeing on the feed. They're going viral constantly. They're really funny. They're relieving
Right.
stress and tension for us. They're voicing things that we
Right.
can articulate. That's why they're gaining. But they're not trying to sell a 7-step course. They're not trying to necessarily get themselves in the media. They're working for companies and building personalities, and you need to know what your goals are to really have the distinction in how to do it.
So I hired a consultant last year, completely worth it. She's why we've had a somewhere between a 7 and 8x return on our dollar investment into LinkedIn. And I was following you, Renee, Jeremy Tunis, and a bunch of other people with huge audiences, hundreds of engagements. And I was like, why can't I get there? And she said, well, Dustin, Renee wants to do courses. Renee is doing this, a very different goal than you are. You, Dustin, are trying to target an audience of really 500 people. You know, agency owners, agency executives, consultants who are charging 15 a month. You know, we have a very narrow audience, and the way we're providing our services is very different than you are, Renee. And I made a mistake in December, to the algorithm point. Everyone disappeared on LinkedIn, at least in my world. And the only people left were influencers. So I started kind of following all the. I was trying to do my engagement every day. You know, show the algorithm I was alive, engage with people because I'm good at that. And it actually hurt me in January because engaging with all the influencers meant that's who showed up on my feed.
Yeah.
And none of my target, none of my target audience showed up. And
Yeah,
so,
that's a good point.
and so I had to be really careful about what I'm saying, to whom I'm saying it, and why I'm saying it. Because if you try to copy other people, social media can be a tool to get in the press, get back to the point of the conversation, but you have to know what you're saying, why you're saying it, to whom you're saying it. I forgot all the things that Jamie said for what, but Again, we call it the 3 T's. Topic at the right time from someone with the right title. Otherwise, you're toast because you're trying to copy everyone else instead of being unique and offering a very narrow thing that, inch wide, mile deep.
And
Yeah.
that's why it's important to lean into the media ecosystem, because that's just what I've been calling it for years. It's like if you have the academic background and the
Mhm.
expertise and
Mhm.
you want press, you should be following the news, absorbing everything you can that's going on and forming an opinion and
Yes.
sharing those opinions.
Mhm.
Because if you're not, you're just not going to stand out.
Mhm.
But if you come up with like a really clever way to say something or a phrase about something in the news that really helps illustrate your point of view, that's also going to help you stand out. And there's ways on
Right.
social media that many political commentators are now using. And I understand sometimes technology makes it hard to create that content, right? You're like, I don't know how to do it. There's
Yeah.
so many ways that you can learn. But by putting a news article behind you on social media, if you want to make a video in front of you, a headline, talk about it. There's a lot of ways to lean in and make yourself relevant, but I always tell people you need to think like a producer and act like a journalist, because if you don't,
Right.
you
Absolutely.
Right.
definitely are going to potentially add to the mis and disinformation online, and you don't want to do
And the
that.
Yeah,
noise. Yeah.
do your research, right? We were talking earlier that the idea of there's a lot of things that blow up so quickly, and having the news background like we all do, we know how to kind of, I mean, especially with AI, there's a lot of it's a lot getting a lot harder to tell what is real and what isn't. So
Yep.
just sharing that, as Jamie was saying, can be very dangerous, because then you're contributing to the misinformation, disinformation ecosystem for a quick, because you think it's about to go viral and you want to be on the cutting edge of these trends. And that's why,
Yep.
that's why I would tell anyone who's watching this, this is why you need people who have experience working, having worked in media, who
Mhm.
work in the communication space, to say, pump the brakes. I wouldn't, I don't, I, this doesn't pass my smell test. I wouldn't
Yeah.
touch it. Like there was a very light example of where there was a bunch of different animals hopping on a trampoline in a backyard, caught on a doorbell camera. And
Oh, yeah, yeah. The
everyone was
Bears
like,
was it?
that's, yeah,
Yeah.
that was fake. But
Right.
it looks so real. And that's
What?
another thing that they're doing with AI now, is they're using the Ring, the doorbell camera
Yeah.
style, so that it's harder to detect whether or not it's
What's,
real. And
yep.
coming from a managing editor position, that this would be a nightmare, even in the last year and a half since I've been out of the space. How do you determine what's real and what's fake, and not get caught up in it? So that's the biggest caution that I would have about jumping on trends. And the other thing about jumping on trends is you actually have to feel it in your soul that you have an opinion on it, versus this is,
Yeah.
oh, Taylor Swift
Yes.
engagement. I got to write something about this, because otherwise I'll seem out of touch. And if you don't have a strong opinion, or you've read 6 or 7 articles that capture what you're trying to say, share those articles, right? And comment on it.
But
Yeah.
do it within the
I
narrative that you already have too. Go ahead, Renee.
totally. It has to be relevant. Yes. It needs to be relevant to your overall premise, platform. Yes. Narrative, brand narrative, or expertise. But I wanted to jump on this. I heard a great reframe about really actually thinking about not so much sharing your opinion, but really sharing your perspective. And the difference
Yes.
being everybody has an opinion, but a
Yes.
perspective is how you
Brilliant.
frame what you think in a way that creates
Mm-hmm.
immediate value for your
Mm-hmm.
audience. And I really love that distinction.
It's
Because
your
like,
point of
as my
view,
dad
right?
said, yeah, it's your point of view, right? But like, as my dad said, like, everybody has an opinion and an asshole, but like a perspective is like really what provides value.
Well,
And I love
and
that.
two, I also think being counter narrative, we always encourage our clients to be going against the grain. So we had an AI client when Dow Jones threatened to sue OpenAI for allegedly crawling behind the paywall without paying for it. This is about 2.5 years ago. And the client said, actually, we pay more for access to 8,000 sources than we do for our cloud software. This is an AI company. That's a cool perspective and with a piece of data behind it. And what they said is, if you don't pay content creators, AI will get worse, because AI is based on the content that is available. And so just to I want to share my screen really quickly to the point of being counter narrative. I actually, when everyone else is having an opinion about Target's CEO or Cracker Barrel's logo, I just said it's okay to not have an opinion. I literally didn't care. And people, of course, are shocked by that, but that was a counter narrative thing to say, and it got pretty good engagement. And I was able to use that for another post to say, I still don't care about the rebrand, but here's my opinion on their terrible apology.
But see, what you're doing is you're leaning into the news, you're leaning into the
Right.
media and what everyone's talking about with your own expert opinion. And that
Right.
makes you a potential source. And a podcaster
Right.
or a TV news station might have come across this
Right.
and said, oh, Dustin could be good.
Well, and also on the personal side, we had our 8-year anniversary, and this was a little bit of a way to add that family thing into it.
Yeah.
There you go.
No one really
You're
commented on the
sharing.
dinosaur though.
They didn't count the
Disappointed
kids.
by that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, still no kids. But my wife did look like a dinosaur one day, so I put that on.
But there you go. I mean, Dustin, even probably from my sense of talking with all of you this hour, you probably are sharing the least of yourself, and that's a pretty personal post still. And I think that is a perfect use, in my view, of LinkedIn. It's you're not always going to get huge killer engagement on all of your content.
Right.
But if it feels like it does define you more, and as you have said repeatedly here, like you're a family man, and that's part of who you are. So I think that really helps, and I got that from we've talked once before this, but I got the sense of that even through the minimalist efforts of posting about your outside your career.
Well, and that's it. Go ahead, Jenny.
No, I was going to say, LinkedIn is still a text-friendly place. Like you
Super
can
tech
do
friendly.
text posts there, share extended, thoughts, and it will generate interest. However, LinkedIn is also really interested in seeing video. And what I'm seeing that works in video is more of the informal behind the scenes style that you see more and more news organizations doing. Like if you ever watch social media aggressively, like CNN is now having like their anchors and reporters show up. Like maybe the anchors are choosing to, but they certainly are showing up in their offices with their hair undone or walking and talking over cords that are running for a live shot, and you're seeing it all where you didn't see that before. And on LinkedIn, you'll see more and more people walking and talking. Like there's some great examples of like, I'm just out for my walk and I had some advice. I started to record that. I had 40,000 views on one post on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and it was a behind the scenes of what it's like to be a content creator. And those behind the scenes videos, I mean, it did well once, it didn't do well the second time. But on LinkedIn, if you're consistent with your style, you can probably do really well there too and generate interest by building yourself up as an expert within your niche.
And that's the key, right? Because, for example, my father's company got into a Boston-based TV station. They were featured by it. Not because they have a strong social media presence, but because they have 7 franchise locations. They have a story of 3 partners of the company, all went to the same, they were roommates in college. So that's that personal story from 40 years ago. Then these guys came together, started a business. But it's the 7 locations. It's the podcasts they have where they bring in subject matter experts on growing their business and being an entrepreneur. And it's that strong story. So I want to really bring back, as we wrap up the show here, this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this. I want to bring back to the point that you need a strong story. A lot of people think, and I thought this when I got into blogging 16 years ago. I was like, oh man, I'm going to jump in and throw my opinions in. And that's great. And my father one day said, Dustin, sure, you're writing about Medicaid reform or Medicare reform or Social Security, but you write like a 24-year-old. And I didn't know what he meant. I had all the data and I had everything, but I didn't know how to do that personal touch. I didn't know how to make that a story that resonated beyond the facts of the situation. And so I do think that a lot of people think they can jump on social media and that will be the thing. That'll get them. And they don't understand the need to have that story, that impact. What are you saying and why are you saying it? And that's where I think social media can be overrated. Not that it's useless, but I think it's overrated by people who don't understand that it's really the storytelling and the data behind it to get you into the press, to show that value.
Those are the
Agreed.
people I'm trying to get into my storytelling cohort.
And those are the people I need to get into my course that I'm building out.
We should
Well, I'm glad
collaborate.
that you-
I
Jamie.
think we may build on each other because
Yeah.
I'm
We
more
should
like
totally.
technical. Like, here's how
Yeah.
you record yourself. Here's how you want to
Right.
look on
Right.
camera. These are what the trends are. This is how you think about your script.
Love
Here's
that.
how you can edit quickly in CapCut. And I do this throughout the course. And then at the end, I give them reasons and why and how to start networking before I say bye-bye. Join my monthly group call because I want to help people navigate this.
Yeah.
There's so much opportunity right now. Like,
Yeah.
I have a podcast, he's doing a LinkedIn live show. There's so many opportunities for people to land press, right? And media
Right.
attention
Mhm.
that if you're not out there, you're just not going to be seen. And that's really what it comes down to now. If you aren't putting yourself on these platforms in some way and you want press, it's just going to get harder for you to secure it. Do you
Well said.
agree, Simon?
Yeah, I would say, and I would just say that when you're creating content for social media, always be thinking about the end user. What are they getting out of it?
Yeah.
Are they going to click that? If it's Instagram, are they going to click that share button and share it with? Are they going to comment? Are they going to engage? Is it going to create a conversation? Versus just I'm going to share my message and hope and put it out there because that just becomes video wallpaper and we're drowning in content. So you need to
Yep.
differentiate by giving away one of your, if you're an expert in your area, giving away, not giving it away all for free, but like we said, we didn't hear all the 7 steps from Jamie, but we heard a few. So just being able to give something away for free shows that you're showing up in good faith, and that there's value in people. It's worth people following you,
Yeah.
and it may be worth the media giving you a call and saying, "Hey, we'd love to have you on our morning show. You have a lot of great insights, and we love what you're doing on social media."
And I also want to close and make sure we don't forget about trade outlets. We talked about national media and local media, but trade outlets too are really key because they're desperate for content. We do a lot of op-eds, and the op-ed market certainly shrunk, non-sponsored post type op-eds. But the number of providers has shrunk even more because everyone's going to Substacks, LinkedIn, newsletters, podcasts. And so we find a lot of openings in trade outlets where even if you're not showing up on social media, if you have a $5 million a year company and you can show that you've done things dynamically within the community or to your customers, or you're adding new technology or processes, that's the foundation, no matter whether you're using social or not. So never forget about trade outlets when you're trying to get into the press, because you're desperate for content and they will take it.
And
They're
go to
great
Dustin,
credibility.
right? To get that.
Credibility, but also maybe if it's your target audience
Yeah.
needs that trade publication, then
Well, of course,
that's way
yeah.
better than getting a feature in Forbes, right? Like
Correct.
Forbes
Way
might
better.
feel better. It might, feel good for your
Right.
ego, but like if you're a manufacturing company and you get in like manufacturing today, then
Yeah.
that makes a lot more sense for you. Probably you're going to see more.
And way more
ROI
eyeballs,
on that.
your target demo of who you're
Yeah.
trying to reach, right? In those
Yeah.
trade
Yeah.
publications, even if there's far fewer eyeballs overall.
And then those
Yeah.
people are going to say, I heard Simon, he said this. I think he'd be great. We should book him.
Right, exactly. And again, to the point of everyone else on the panel, is make sure that, if you do have that social media content, that it's super credible, because
Yeah.
no one at CNN or Fox is going to say, "Oh, your story went viral. We definitely want you on air." But then if they can see that you've been in the trade outlets, they can see that you have a podcast, they can see that you know yourself and you can handle yourself, that will give you the added advantage on that type of platform.
I've loved this conversation so much.
Yeah, it's been
This was
really
great.
interesting. Thank you
We
so
could
much
keep
for
going,
putting
I
it
think.
together.
I'm actually
Yeah.
supposed to be taking today off. My wife let me have. This is like the only thing I'm doing today for work. So I have to jump
Extra
back
long
to
weekend.
my
Thank
6
you all.
girls. So
I will
thanks,
connect with you,
folks.
follow up. So nice to meet you both, Simon and Jamie.
This was
Thank
great.
you
Yeah,
guys so
Take
much.
care,
likewise.
everybody. Have a good long weekend.
All right, and like I
You
said,
too.
hopefully the audience got something out of this. That was one of my key messages here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Thanks, folks.